Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. We have a returning guest today. Very excited to welcome Dr. Gabrielle back to the podcast because, of course, we did our first episode together. And afterwards and messaging, it was like, I think we're onto something here with doing episodes in the future because we've got the vibe and our ethos, it's so geared towards helping the community and helping individuals, and I think that sometimes that can be missing in the space. So thank you first of all for coming back on.
Thank you for having me back. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's really cool, isn't it, when you do podcasts with someone that it just makes sense and it flows, and I feel like it contributes heavily to the listener's experience as well because it's like almost two friends chatting and you can pick up stuff because you warm to the people talking, of course.
Yes, absolutely. And like you can get on just the same wavelength and vibe with it. And it's so enriching for everyone.
For sure. Now, today we're going to be talking about, and in the post that I put on Instagram, it's topics that I've, of course, touched on over the years. It's been 3.5 years now with the podcast, but I feel like you've definitely got a different spin on some of the things from our first episode where I'm like, that's really intriguing for me as a coach, as a bodybuilder myself, and just having that diverse, there's topics, isn't there? And then there's life experiences, there's your experiences as a coach, what you've done in the space to actually go, we could dig a bit deeper here. And it was your suggestion to essentially talk about what can cause bias in the bodybuilding space, how that can affect coaching programs. And it's a can of worms per se, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because when we're talking about bias, that can apply to so many different facets of coaching and working with diverse populations down to our own internal beliefs. So it's something that we experience in our internal and external worlds. And most of us are not aware of how those biases are affecting us.
Yeah, I love that actually, that sentiment to start us off. We're not often aware of what is affecting those internal beliefs. And we often, we essentially build our character as a child and then we neglect maybe revisiting that part of our life. Now, it can, of course, be an uncomfortable space of time for people that have maybe not had the childhood that they want to reflect on, or maybe it could have been, really good and fond memories, but we do neglect revisiting that. And it's something that I try and do as a coach to sort of track back when I first start with someone. What was your childhood like, around the eating, exercise, sport, etc. And it really does define who you are. Parts of that being able to then bring that into a successful coaching program because there's that understanding then. I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely, because that's part of the context of the person that we're working with. Like they're going to come to us with a whole lifetime of experiences and beliefs and needs and desires and beliefs about how they can meet those needs and how they can get to where they want to be. And even though, we can practice in a client-centered way and do things like, motivational interviewing and whatnot, without that deeper understanding of who that person really is, it can be very difficult to connect and to have an effective coaching session because we then come in with our own set of beliefs and experiences and biases. And we may interpret things that they say in a way that's very different from what they meant. And it can be difficult then to kind of read between the lines and really understand, what are the emotions that this person is experiencing. And then when we are coming at them with this preconceived notion, we can get into fix it mode. We can, want to be working with a specific person rather than like the person who's actually in front of us. And so that can just erode the coaching dynamic and that alliance that we want to build with our clients.
Yeah, it reminds me actually of working previously with business mentors, and they sort of push you towards building your avatar. And I always found that incredibly tricky because I feel like I work with so many different people, and I like that. And you sort of pigeon yourself into a hole as a coach because it's like I work with X avatar. And it's then also difficult to sometimes, if you're wanting to work with a diverse range of people, how do you market yourself as a coach in the space
Yes.
to attract all of
Yes.
these? people, I'd actually be interested to know your thoughts on. So, a business coach I previously worked with, he said, and I absolutely believe this, that my social media, where I'm a competitor, I would post competitive photos, things like this, what I'm doing. He always said that that could be quite off-putting for people because it's not necessarily an attainable goal for them. So if I'm working with someone that doesn't want to be a competitor, etc., and that sat with me, Gabrielle, and it still does because I'm like, I want to show what I do, but of course I don't want
Yeah.
then, feel anyone to feel like I'm trying to be better or anything like that. It's quite difficult then.
Yes. I was thinking about the client avatar idea actually just yesterday. I was like thinking about the podcast, and one of the ways that we can potentially observe our biases is to imagine that client avatar. That client avatar probably looks a lot like you, right? Like we imagine our client, even without knowing anything about them, we are biased naturally to interact with other people and to relate with other people that look externally like us. So that's one aspect. If we are saying like my client avatar is a specific gender, a specific age, has a specific income, all of these like granular details, a lot of those are going to reflect what we see in ourselves, or even what we might want to see in ourselves. And then we come up with a person that we want to work with. And while that can be very effective in some ways for messaging, when I think of my client avatar, I think of what is this person struggling with? I don't think about their gender or their age or their physique. I think about, what my service is to help people with what they're struggling with.
I love
And
that.
so that is, that's what I think of. And I don't, I will say I don't have a background in marketing, and I'm sure that there's research and evidence to support that specific approach. But that specific approach of having like a very specific client avatar isn't necessarily going to translate to every industry. And in an industry like health and fitness and wellness coaching, where we are working one on one with complex individuals, rather than trying to sell one product, the same product, to a huge group of people, I really think we have to look at that in a different way. Because when we are working with a client, we have to be open to the reality of that client. And we can't coach the person that we want to have in front of us. Everyone's, oh, I want my client to be coachable. I mean, what does that really mean? Like, does that mean you want your client to do what you tell them to do? Because then you don't necessarily want a human being. You want an automaton who's just going to like follow your instructions. So I really think that, that the idea of creating a client avatar could be a more effective exercise in identifying our biases. Does that client avatar have the same skin color as you, the same gender identity, the same age, the same income level? If that's the case, then maybe it's a cue to check on why your client avatar looks that very specific way and lives that very specific way. And if that's potentially limiting your outreach, if it's potentially affecting the way that you're interacting with your clients, and potentially affecting, your client intake and retention, because you have a stronger identity with this very specific type of client. And maybe you're not comfortable working with people that come from a different cultural or ethnic background.
Mm.
And it's just a way that we can, identify those biases and grow, and also see the biases that are part of the fitness industry as a whole. Because just like we have client avatars, very often clients have their own personal avatar of what they want to look like and how they want to live. And that's what they will often look for in coaches. And so you end up with, a coach's body being their business card. We can talk all about that too. And that can be really problematic, because that doesn't necessarily mean that that coach is going to be able to form an effective alliance with that client and help them without causing inadvertent harm.
For sure. It's certainly something that goes through my mind even in a gym environment, when I'm just training, I think, oh, I just have these thoughts. I wonder what people think of me, if they know I'm a coach, do they think I'm reachable? Do they think, oh no, I wouldn't want to talk to her? She's friendly, like, and it's very when it's in a public space, I'd say it's very difficult in some respects because you want to, of course, train and do your thing. You also want to be able to build relationships in a gym environment. You want people to feel comfortable. And it's so hard with the perception of what someone's belief system is because you don't often know it. So you try and put yourself across in a gym environment or even on social media. It's almost like you hope when you are genuine, you hope that people catch that message. And I would always say, in this regard, working out your biases, like you say, that would be a really good take on it to work out your, avatar and dig deep on that and understand it more. But trying to be authentic to who you are and what you do believe, and actually trying to utilize that for your social media structure for when you're in gym environments. And I know that that's something that people find very, very tricky. And I wonder if the biases and their past would contribute to really trying to understand who they are and maybe who they want to become and actually staying true to that. I feel like that's, quite a difficult space for a lot of people, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, because many of us feel that we have to perform in some way, especially in the health and fitness spaces. Health, fitness they are not something that people believe that you do like without talking about it, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
you have to look a certain way, and that's where like the idea that, oh, a coach's body is their business card, because people expect that fitness has a certain look. And I just saw a post the other day that was like, oh, do coaches need to look fit? And that made me wonder, like, what does that mean? Look fit in what way? I mean, I think that most people, when they think fit, they think like lean muscle definition. That doesn't necessarily mean that that person is exceptionally strong or has a great VO2 max. And when you look at athletes, there is an incredibly wide range of physique types, and those physique types are specialized to that sport. So sometimes people need to have a larger body mass because that is what helps them be competitive in their sport. And then you have, athletes that are at the complete opposite end of the range. So even to say like, oh, we're supposed to look fit or we're supposed to look a certain way, that also shows a super obvious bias and, a weight bias, a physique bias, and the assumptions that we make about a person in a specific body. And a person can have, chiseled abs and be an effective physique competitor or, powerlifter or strongman. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be an effective coach. That is a different skill set. And we can say, well, that person obviously knows what works. Well, they know what works for them. They know what works in their specific context.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean, that it's going to work for everyone else. But I mean, I fell into the same mindset when I started getting into fitness. I thought I'm going to have to look a certain way. I have to be lean, or, people aren't going to take me seriously as a coach or as a professional. And that led me down, like almost 2 decades of an eating disorder and body dysmorphia, because I was constantly trying to chase a sense of security and confidence by having a specific look externally. And that was never going to get me there. And my external appearance has really never been an important part of my coaching or my marketing. Even during that period of time, like people weren't signing up for coaching with me because of my physique. They were signing up because of the things that I was talking about and the way that I related to people. But that to me didn't ever feel like enough until recent years.
Yeah. It's definitely an internal job, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's the deep dive in on your own. It sounds like we've had very similar correlations to our own journeys as coaches and the bodybuilding, etc., as it were. And it's like you get to a point where you realize, if people are going to gravitate towards me, they're going to gravitate towards me for who I am, and that's what I love about the authenticity. The thought process there. It's like if you're truly yourself, of course, there's a journey to get to that point, and working out biases, stigma, background, etc., contributes to that. But it's so freeing, isn't it, Gabrielle? it's hard to describe when you've been through the disordered type thinking, the body dysmorphia. Are people looking at me? What are people thinking? All of this stuff that just causes this overwhelm and nervous energy in your mind. I remember you saying you had ADHD in the previous episode. Again, I do have a lot of ADHD listeners. That on top of, all of these things that you've just described, the mind is, it's very, I'm assuming here, but I'd imagine it was very hard to sort of know where to direct that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, before I got my diagnoses, I was diagnosed first with depression and anxiety, which were really just, the outcomes of having undiagnosed neurodivergence that was affecting my way of life and my quality of life. And those extra layers absolutely contributed to increased rumination and compulsive behaviors and feeling really confused at times, even by my own thought and behavior dissonance. I mean, there were times when I was like, oh, this should be easy for me. Other people do this, I shouldn't be so emotional about this. And yet I had a really difficult time, maintaining consistency in the last few years of macro tracking and the way that I related to people and the way that I related to myself and the very strict rules that I had for myself and the specific order of behaviors that I had that, when you have to do a million things for like meal prep and, go to the gym and do a certain amount of things, there was no room, there was no capacity for flexibility. And so like, that was my entire life.
Mm.
And so, in the last several years, like understanding my mind more and working through my relationship with food and my body image, it's incredibly liberating. And there's more space. I mean, there's literally more time and energy in my day. And, I can do other things. And that's the resounding response that I hear from clients too, that go through that process, is that they say like everything feels more spacious. Like I have more energy, I have more mental capacity. Suddenly I'm doing like a bunch of different things. I have all of these different hobbies and life is so much better. And that's without any physique change. I mean, maybe the physique change, but it wasn't something that we were paying attention to. That was based on the concerted effort to break out of that cycle and those unhelpful thought patterns. But when we are in that place as coaches, it is very easy then to perpetuate that cycle in our clients, and neither party is going to potentially be aware of the harm of what's going on.
I'm so glad that it came to that part there as well, and getting some more insight into yourself, because again with podcasts we said at the start, listening to two people that are able to talk freely, and people that potentially have neurodivergency, ADHD, anything like that, to hear you talk about it and actually pinpoint some of the things that you've done is incredibly important. I really love the piece there about, coaches essentially gifting their own pathologies and their own struggles and troubles into their clients, because it's something that I see a hell of a lot, Gabrielle. Like I don't, I try not to get too invested in the emotional side of it, but it can actually, in the past, it's really brought me down, because being in this place of influence with the podcast, etc., I always see, when I see these things happening, almost enabling things, and coaches doing things on stories and sharing, what they're eating and what they're not eating. And when they share it in a certain way without context, I find that that's incredibly difficult for the consumer, because you literally get a snapshot on social media, don't you? It's like, it's wild, and you see, I know athletes that are using PEDs, they're using fat burners, they're doing excessive cardio, but then they're posting that they're eating loads of the donuts and all of the things. And then someone could watch
Mhm.
that and go, oh, I can eat like that because that would make me a successful athlete. And that's just a small example, there's a lot of things. And that's tricky because you see it, don't you? And it's hard to know what to do in this space to have an impact on things like that. Of course, I'll do like stories, I talk about it on the podcast and stuff, but it's another can of worms, I guess.
Yeah, because in that case, you're already up against layers of bias. You know, the vast majority of people have inherent weight biases. There are also biases around gender. So people are going to be more likely to trust someone who's of the same gender. But even in that case, sometimes there are outliers where people are going to trust a male, or someone who's male presenting rather than someone who's female presenting, because there are assumptions about how, logical males are and, versus females, just as one example.
Yeah.
And so, we have those layers of weight, of gender, sometimes of age, of authority. So someone who is older and appears to be more experienced, people are going to trust what they say more than someone who appears to be younger or have less experience.
Mm.
So there are these, logical fallacies that appeal to authority. And then there's also the bias of what a person is first exposed to. So, like the first set of information that they get, they're going to believe that. And it's going to take much more evidence to the contrary to encourage them to change their mind. And it's not just that facts and information are going to be enough to change their mind. There also has to be an emotional component. And there has to be something that they can relate to emotionally. Like the person that they're listening to has to be relatable, has to be likable. I mean, personality makes a big difference. So there are all of these layers that influence how our messages are perceived, and the vast majority of them are, of course, outside of our control. And unfortunately, there are plenty of people in the industry that benefit from those biases, whether they are aware of it or not, and that are not it's not in their interest to change what people think. I mean, if someone's making money off of the naturalistic fallacy and they're saying, all chemicals are bad and they've got a huge following, then of course they're not going to contribute to the betterment of the industry to help people become more media literate, because that is making them a great deal of money. So it is tough. It's tough to go out and try to be authentic and market with integrity and also with care and conscientiousness and responsibility, with an awareness of, gosh, all the ways that we can unintentionally create harm or perpetuate biases. And as much as I am passionate about this, like I still haven't taken all of the steps, that I know I could take. There are steps that I don't know exist yet. So, I'm doing my best, which is the only thing that we can do. But, even just that awareness of like, hey, I know that there are biases that I'm perpetuating or that I'm being influenced by, and trying to just start by figuring out what those are, that can help you to become less biased. No one is ever free of being biased, but, to try to get to a place that's more nuanced and more, I want to say careful. That might be a strange word, but, a way that is more, conscientious and considerate.
Yeah, I feel like the considerate part is good with regards to when you are looking at things like social media, or maybe you're following someone, or however it is, actually understanding why maybe you are gravitating towards certain people. Because I do believe, we've touched on in the previous episode about food disorders or pathologies, and maybe over exercising, self-restricting, or binging, all of the different things that fall under that umbrella. Sometimes I feel like, and it'd be interesting to know your thoughts, when you've done something like potentially overeaten, say, you almost want someone else to have done it so it doesn't feel like you're so alone. And you can start to almost search out people that are doing similar behaviors to you so you don't feel so isolated, but also it adds an element of justification to your actions. And I feel like that's where I do find that it does, for me, I'm like, I really feel a strong emotion to that, because if we continue to justify, and we forget those people might be following us, we might forget those people are really, really struggling, Gabrielle, and that's the thing. People, whether it's not, they don't care, or like you say, maybe they don't realize. And I'd urge any of the listeners to sort of have a think about this in a bit of a deep dive. Who are you following? Is it because actually there's some things there that potentially you could look at working on, and becoming a bit more self-aware? Now, that's not me saying it's easier or not uncomfortable, and that's the tricky part. You need to almost get to a point, don't you, with like we have with the weighing of the food and the neuroticism, where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I need to change this, and that in itself maybe would be a first step to actually go, well, I wonder why I've chosen this coach, or why do I follow these people? Why do these people affect me so much when I see their posts on social media? Would you say that that's a good thing to sort of start to think about how biased you are and who you're following, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's confirmation bias. Like we want to know, we want to search out information that tells us that what we believe is correct. And so if we are, engaging in a behavior that we're not sure about, or we think like, oh, is someone else doing this? Is this weird? And then we do see someone else doing it, then yeah, like you said, it can be a justification, a normalization. And we see that, I really see that so often with certain schools of thought around like, the tough love type of coaching or macro tracking,
Yeah.
that people will generally be quite dogmatic about it, and they think like, well, everyone can macro track, you just have to be like less emotional about it. And that just erases the realities of so many people. But you will see that there are clients of theirs that post and say, like, oh, this has been so effective, like, like my coach is awesome and I agree with this, and like this is the right approach. That person probably self-selected to that coach because that coach was already confirming things that that person believes to be true. That doesn't mean that those things are true. It means that they sound accurate and relatable to that person, but it doesn't mean that they're evidence-based. It doesn't mean that they're not harmful. It just means that that client already has this set of beliefs. And so if that coach engages in criticism, there's the tough love, there's shame involved in that coaching. If that client believes that that is how they need to be motivated, if that client believes that they deserve shame, they deserve self-criticism, and that things like self-compassion are dangerous because then they're going to let themselves off the hook, that doesn't mean that that coaching is effective or that it is not harmful. That is harmful. It is harmful to perpetuate a high level of self-criticism and shame. That is not going to help that client flourish and lead a like pursue their own goals autonomously, without the coach going forward. And it's going to perpetuate more cycles of self-criticism and shame. So the fact that someone likes, what the coach is doing, that confirms both of their biases, but it's actually not an evidence-based practice in any way. But that's something that we also need to be aware of, that, we are going to be drawing a specific crowd that is going to most likely agree with what we're saying. And that's not necessarily problematic, but we have to make sure that what we're saying is as evidence-based as possible. And while there is room for anecdote and experience, we also have to be open to the possibility that what we've done in the past has been dogmatic and harmful, and that it does deserve to change.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like we're then crossing over into almost the ego of coaches, and also, as you rightly, said when before we jumped on and we were talking a little bit about what we could explore, staying in your lane as a coach and admitting that we need to upskill here, guys. And it's something that I often reference. When I take a client on, my job, and this is how my first coach 13 years ago framed it. His job was to share everything over to me over, spanning across years. We were together 8 years. And for me to level up to where he is, then he would level up. And then I would level. And it's this like tandem of both of us leveling up together and me essentially sponging his knowledge and understanding from an education standpoint, so that one day if I did need to stop coaching, as you've said there, what do you do if then suddenly you can't afford the coach, or something changes, the coach is no longer around, etc., etc. Because I just truly believe that there can be this missing in the space where it's either people are not staying in their lane, or people aren't invested in their own education. And that doesn't need to be nutrition certifications. This can be looking at so much as a coach, because let's not forget, if you're listening and you're a coach, the coach's job is to guide, the coach's job is to have more expertise for essentially the person, the pupil, the student, however you want to frame that, to learn from, because they're coming to you for a result, but also for your expertise. And, of course, you've got the crossover of dictatorship, or whether you're, a coach that's a bit more wanting to build a relationship. But it is, it's harmful in this space. If you're listening and you've got clients that do have signs of a food disorder, if there's things that are out of your realm, if you're saying you're a GI specialist or a hormone specialist and you're not, it's it's not on, because people are desperate, and you are facilitating them feeling that there's hope with no real expertise in the space. And that in itself, it's dangerous, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah, especially when you have people that are encouraging clients to avoid, further medical testing, pursue alternative therapies that are either unsupported or have already been debunked. There is a huge level of risk there. And it's not that we have to try to go to the other side and, become like medical professionals and diagnose things. The
Yeah.
people trying to do that, that's equally problematic. But to understand, of course, like red flags, risk factors and signs, and then be able to refer people out. And I think part of the issue is that, again, there are logical fallacies at play, like the naturalistic fallacy and, appeal to authority, where coaches might believe that pharmaceutical interventions are harmful because they're not natural. And then the client is going to believe them because this is an authority figure. And, I want to believe that the vast majority of us have good intentions and we want to help people. And we also, if that is our goal, need to understand where our ability to help ends because of the limits of our knowledge and expertise and training. There's nothing wrong with that. And
Mm.
then to be able to, refer people out, like with enough awareness to spot red flags, and then to take the next step to say, hey, I've noticed this, that, and the other thing. I'm a little bit concerned. What are your thoughts on visiting whatever specialist here? Or if the client's coming to you and saying, oh, I'm having all these weird symptoms, reflect, that has to be really concerning. Of course, you're worried about it. How can I help you, take the next step to figure out what's going on?
Mm.
But that next step doesn't involve me, being WebMD or something and trying to give you my best guess. It is, providing information and then saying, if you do want my recommendation, my next recommendation is to visit a doctor that has the training and expertise in this field.
I do feel like as well, when you do take ownership of that, every time I have for, a multitude of things over my time of coaching, the client actually, I feel like, respects you more, because it's,
Yes.
that's not my realm. However, I will
Mm-hmm.
absolutely do my utmost to direct you in, whether that's someone in the fitness space, if it was, say, something to do with a blood report or something like this, or if it's from a
Mm-hmm.
medical standpoint, it's like I can absolutely point you in the right direction. And it's whether you then work in tandem, or maybe that client goes, down a different route for a space of time. And actually, if they were going to come back to the space, guess what? They're probably going to rehire you as a coach because you did the right thing. And that's what we forget.
Mhm, exactly. Like referring someone out doesn't mean that you're going to lose the client or that, they're going to think, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. No, you know what you're talking about because you're doing the thing that you know about. And then you're like having a level of intellectual humility to say, oh, I don't know about this other stuff. And, networking with other practitioners. And so, yes, when that client figures out what's going on, and they say, oh, I feel so much better. Like now I'm ready to come back. They're going to come back to you because there is a level of trust there because you didn't try to overstep and impress them. You tried to help them.
Yeah, yeah, it feels good as well.
Mhm.
Again, any coaches listening, it feels great, because when
Yes.
you're in your early days, you're sort of like, I've got to fix everything. I must know everything. I'm a shit coach if I don't know the answer to this really complex question, which is really out of my realm. When you actually go,
Mhm.
look, and I would ordinarily send a voice note that's a bit more personal, and I'd say, look, this question you've asked, it is actually, I could actually get more information here. Like, I know enough, but I'm absolutely not happy to, without referring you on or speaking with someone else. And that, oh, okay, that's fine. You have got your areas of expertise, and it's about as well, the efficacious route of being a good coach in your realm, because I hands down could have tons of clients, but they're clients that are not in my remit. When it's any food disorder related, anything of that realm, I'm not going to go across that bridge because it's not in my scope. Yes, I can help with neuroticism, certain pathologies, as we agree. You can absolutely help direct the ship for someone because we have the anecdote, the experience, and a level of knowledge that could help. But again, it's being transparent about that, isn't it? It's like if you sit down with someone on a consult and they say, I do struggle a bit with overeating. I've never binged, I've never made myself sick, but I do find myself overeating a bit, now and then. It's like, well, we can talk about that. I'm absolutely comfortable with
Yes.
that. But it goes any further, yeah, I don't know. I said this to my mentor once on a podcast. I was like, I don't know how coaches sleep when they're just able to go, oh, it's all right, you've done a binge and made yourself sick, let's carry on. I literally can't
Mhm.
fathom it, Gabrielle, because I would be an anxious mess. I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Yeah, because you're then worried, like, did I play a part in this? How do I help? What is going on, for the client? And, there it is difficult when we're working in such a complex area that we don't receive the types of training that a therapist would receive, but we're often working in this gray area between, like the very obvious, like, providing a training plan is obviously not something that's protected. But, when we're working with like cognitive behavioral coaching or acceptance based training, there are interventions that are equally used in a therapeutic setting as they would be in a coaching setting. They just have different names.
Mm.
And then the severity of the pathology is also going to be greater, in a clinical setting, but it's not always obvious. And we aren't necessarily taught, even in well recognized coaching programs, certifications, the sort of like the danger areas that can develop when we're working with a person in that type of setting where we're learning about them and helping them improve their lives. And there are potential dangers in developing that type of a relationship with a client if we don't know what we need to be avoiding. So for example, like it might not be helpful for us to be both a friend and a coach to a person. Like we're not this person's best friend. This person is paying us to provide a service to them. And while there can be a friendliness there, and there's a baseline, a base of, respect and rapport that we would have with a friendship, we have to be careful about what other types of relationships we're building with our clients, or like a romantic relationship, can you be a personal trainer and like date this person at the same time? And, surely there are outliers, but we as the person providing the service and being paid and being seen as an expert and authority figure, there's going to be potentially some sort of like power dynamic that's at play there. And, so if our client is upset that, we didn't go to their birthday party, then how is that going to affect our coaching relationship? And similarly, one thing that you mentioned earlier was that coaches can gift their pathologies, and their issues to their clients. And that in therapy it's sort of like transference. It's when we have our own issues and things that we haven't worked through, and then we put those on to our clients, and it affects the way that we coach them and affects the alliance that build with them, because we might see, oh, this client reminds me of my sister who had, so many problems and I couldn't help her. And now I want to like save this client and I'm trying to fix them. Or, like with the shame-based coaching, well, if I have my own issues with self-criticism and I think that I'm not deserving and I'm not a worthy person, then I'm going to put that on for my client. And, we aren't taught this stuff. Like we're taught, effective coaching skills, but we go in fairly unaware of anything beyond really, the obvious like HIPAA regulations and, that sort of like business ethics side of things. But there really is a lack of awareness and training when it comes to how our own issues can affect the coaching relationship and the care that we need to take within that relationship to protect it from external forces and added complexity when it already is a complex dynamic.
For sure. Like you say, there are outliers in every scenario, but generally speaking, it is. And I truly believe my coaches have always been on, and I don't mind saying it, like they're almost like a god to me. Now, not in
Mm-hmm.
a weird way, but it's like I
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, it's like basically I want to do them proud. Like they're here for me,
Sure.
and I want to learn from them. I
Mm-hmm.
want to, when I'm competing, step on stage and it be for the two of us, and I want that to be
Mm-hmm.
celebrated. And when things are tough, I'm thinking, no, we're doing it, together, and it's almost like a little team type vibe. And I've always, wanted that, and I've always wanted that for my clients. Again, I'm not trying to be on a pedestal, but I'd like that facilitation to wanting them to feel that I've got their back and that I'm, as passionate about their journey as they are, and it brings out more passion in them over time, and I love that. I do as well, I have had thoughts in my own mind previously of clients that I've taken on from quite traumatic coaching relationships of an abusive nature. When you actually look
Yeah.
at it, it's essentially emotional abuse.
Oh,
And
for sure.
yeah, I sit with my own thoughts. I'm sure you're very, very similar with the neurodivergence. It's a lot of things ruminate in our mind, right? And we're like, what? And we're intrigued by it. And, when people find themselves in these relationships, it's very interesting to what you've described already with, like, are we predisposed to choose a coach that we think we want a dictator? We think we want someone to be like, you don't funk it, want it hard enough, you've got to push harder, da da da. Then you're in it and you're like, whoa, I don't know what to do because, again, there could be people listening that are in a tricky scenario in this type of narrative. They don't actually know how to get out of that if they start to notice it. But as we know, again, this could be a completely separate podcast, an emotional abusive relationship of any kind. I mean, the stages of that, etc., and what happens. Well, I wonder if we could maybe delve into that from a bias standpoint of if you're attracted to a certain coach and it becomes that type of narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it is a common belief system, the idea that, we need self-criticism and we need shame. And, if you're too kind, then people won't follow through, and that's being too soft. And, self-compassion just means that you're letting yourself go and you're not going to follow through on things. And that belief system is very difficult to change because there's a lot of fear beneath it. That belief system doesn't come from a place of inherent self-worth and real self-assurance and, appreciation for oneself as a human being and, a trust in one's capacity. That comes from a place of fear because it is run to control. It is a familiar programming that many people have become reliant on. And because they don't trust themselves to operate without some threat of, self-criticism, judgment from others, or shame, They don't have any experience. They haven't gathered evidence that they actually are capable of following through on things from a place of self compassion and calmness and trust. And so the threat there is that they're going to, the wheels are going to fall off and they're not going to follow through on anything. And then they're going to fail and everyone's going to laugh at them and judge them. And so they don't know how to replace that fear with a practice of self-trust.
Mm.
And so coaches who come in and say, like, oh, you're like, we don't need to be so kind. People need to feel shame. They should feel bad about themselves if they're in a large body or they're not eating the way they should, and my clients like the tough love. Of course they do, because that's what they know. And just like people will seek out familiar relationships, even if they're unhealthy, and they will engage in behaviors that are harmful to them, but in the moment they feel safe or familiar or comforting, that doesn't mean that it's a good idea. it means, it works short term, but as much as I see this in the evidence-based group, the evidence-based side of fitness, like they rely so heavily on evidence for training programs and nutrition. But when it comes to evidence surrounding psychological health and the real science of behavior change, there's a real resistance. I think in part because that belief system is also a very like westernized, individualistic belief system. It's represented very much in the US and countries with similar infrastructure politically and financially, that we like, it's a pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We don't have time for kindness and self-compassion. You have to ignore the difficult feelings, and just push through and just do the thing. And there is this perception that they're operating on logic, and emotion isn't part of it. Of course emotion is part of it. Like your run, we're emotional creatures, and emotions are what power us to take specific actions. And fear of failure is what powers you to criticize yourself and shame yourself and to seek out others that will also do that. Because the thought of working with someone who will be kind and form an alliance with you and collaborate with you is scary, because you don't know what to do and you feel like you're one step away from screwing it all up. So you look for the person who will treat you the way that you treat yourself. And there have been many times that I've worked with clients that have been assigned to me, or in some cases, because I was working with a company. So it was interesting to see that these clients who didn't necessarily choose me, based on any awareness of my messaging, over time would say, the way that you speak to me is changing the way that I speak to myself. Like I want to talk to myself the way that you talk to me, and they were able to pursue their goals and enjoy their lives more and be kinder to themselves. But it may have been that if they hadn't been assigned to me, if they had chosen a coach, maybe they would have chosen the coach that's like, you need to do what I tell you to do, because they would have said like, oh, that's familiar. Whereas, this person says they want to form an alliance. Like, what is that? And so I see that on both sides. I see that in clients and I see it in coaches. But yeah, it's a really, really difficult one to change. And it's unfortunate because it is so harmful in the long term. And it gives us a false sense of security and efficacy in the short term, because it can be useful to get people to change their behaviors in the short term. But in the long run, like you said, what you want our clients to level up and to really thrive and make decisions on their own, and feel good about those decisions, and not be operating from a place of fear and anxiety and constantly looking for someone to tell them what to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It is as well. I do notice a trend in people that I've spoke to over the years of they're hell bent on wanting a dictator, and actually near on pretty much all of the people that have gone down that route have actually come out of the coaching program. This is a multitude of different countries, different coaches, different level of athlete who I've noticed this because again with the intrigue in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm noticing a trend here. They come out of it and they're like, I do not want a dictator because it doesn't serve my journey, it doesn't serve myself. And I love how you frame that with actually it's how you're talking to yourself. You're looking for someone else to almost validate that yeah, you are a piece of shit. You don't want it enough. You're not good enough. You're never going to be good enough. And I'd also challenge people if they're listening to this that if you are feeling like this pressure of you don't want it enough, so that means you then get it. Well, what if that was removed? Would you still want to be a bodybuilder? Like, is it actually a framing that's causing you to pursue bodybuilding, but maybe you don't even really want to? Like, is this what you truly want to do? Or do you need that fear that you've mentioned? Do you need that pressure to make you do it, but actually maybe it wouldn't be your choice if that was removed. And I know that would be quite hard to, it'd be like a bomb going off in your head, of course, but when it is removed, you spoke about in our first episode together when you removed, the pathology side of things with the food and the body dysmorphia, when you were working on that, you were like, I actually just went and sat and had a meal one day, and that felt quite nice. And it's like, oh, I'm going to do the gym, I'm going to eat well. And you described your life, and it was like, and I'm really happy, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, what if you could remove the fear of judgment, shame, what decisions would you actually be making? Like, what are the real reasons that you want to have a six pack? Is it because it would be cool and you look at it in the mirror and be like, hey, and then like move on about your day, or you just want to see if you can get a six pack and then it's like, oh, okay, that was a cool experiment. Or do you feel like you're supposed to have it because if you don't, people are going to judge you, you're not going to find a partner, like, you're not going to be taken seriously in the industry, you think it's going to vastly improve your life. It is not going to do that. The reality is, yeah, like you can have the six pack and like you're still the same person. You still have to hang out with yourself on the inside, and when you can remove those things and really figure out, like bringing back to the biases, like what are the biases that I've internalized that are making me believe that I need to do X, Y, and Z, or that I need to behave in a certain way? Is it because, I have beliefs about myself based on my gender, my skin color, my age, my weight, and these are dictating the ways that I behave? Then you're not really like living the life that you would have chosen for yourself. And you only get probably one, that you're aware of. So if you're spending day after day operating based on what you think others want from you, you're not going to get to a place where you've built trust in yourself, where you feel grounded and calm and secure and serene within yourself, because you're constantly checking on how you're fitting other people's expectations of you and whether you are behaving like you're, supposed to, based on these biases. And we as coaches can also be doing that to our clients. Like, if you're like a male presenting, then I'm going to have these expectations about your fitness goals. And if you're female presenting, you're going to be something different. And if you're older or if you're younger, and I'm also going to have expectations about the way you should be behaving. Like you signed up for a coach and you're my client avatar. And so you should be able to follow through on this. Why can't you? Like, why can't you just track macros? Why can't you just weigh yourself? Why, or on the other end of things, like, why are you still thinking about wanting to lose weight? If I'm like a weight neutral coach,
Mm.
we are working with the person who's actually in front of us. We're not going to be able to work with just like the most easily coachable, in air quotes, person who comes to us and says, I'm ready to do whatever you tell me to do. And then they do the thing and then like right off into the sunset, happily ever after. That's just not how it works.
It also sprang to my mind actually as well with culture feeding into the sort of tribe mentalities and the building of communities in the space that can actually be extremely rewarding or extremely toxic. And I wonder if that culture piece and also maybe, if you have friends at school and if you got bullied on the other end of the spectrum or what the child, that's just a snippet there, but I wonder if experiences lead to if you suddenly try and find a community in bodybuilding, and actually, again, that becomes a spur to get the six pack, to do more, to, and then suddenly you're in this whole of a community that I'm not actually really that happy here, but I'm still doing the thing because I feel pressured to do it because of my background feeding into maybe this sort of tribe mentality, if you see what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that becomes, it's like, oh, this has now become my personality. This is my social circle. This is what I talk about all the time. And like, I was there. I mean, I was in bodybuilding forums. I was tracking my macros. Like, all of my friends were, people in the industry, coaches that had a very different perspective from what I had now. And it was painful. It really, I mean, I lost what I considered to be friendships because I no longer fit that specific, like I was not in that box anymore. And when I stepped out and I was like, I'm not in any box right now, I was like, do I need to pick a box? Like, people, all these other people in boxes are like really pissed that I'm not in a box right now, but I can't pick one because these seem pretty dogmatic and I want to make decisions based on evidence and I want other people to be able to make decisions, with informed consent based on evidence also. And it was difficult to lose that sense of connection and support and community, and then to come into a space where now it's definitely growing, like being in the middle ground. But yeah, when that is like, if and I'm an introverted person, like I can spend time alone, I'm okay with that. And like, if I've got my hyperfixations and things like that, so like I can entertain myself. But it was still difficult for me. And I can imagine that people who, don't enjoy spending time alone that much and they don't know really how else to spend their time, that they might feel, that there isn't another option for them. And even though they're not really happy, it's better than not having any community at all. It's better than not having an identity. Or, if their business is built on a specific aesthetic, a specific model, it is very difficult to transition. I mean, you have however many hundreds or thousands of followers, and they are following you because of a specific message. Now your message is shifting, and so people are like confused. You might still be getting people that are coming to you for the old stuff, and it is hard then to like establish yourself in a new niche. And, when it's you're self-employed and like that's your thing, yeah, it can keep you very stuck. So there's absolutely a sense of, the tribalism, the community. And also we get a lot of confirmation bias. Like when we're in an echo chamber, we like to hear, that people agree with us. And especially if we're dealing with like imposter syndrome, then the thought of someone saying, hey, I think that you're wrong here is distressing. And we don't necessarily want to expose ourselves to that. So we will remain, in situations that feel safer or familiar, even if that means we are neglecting our authentic selves and shrinking our lives.
Yeah. The neglecting word is very apt there. And it makes me think of the inner child. It's something some of my clients I work with, a little bit deeper on that because it depends on the client and the receptibility there, of course. I don't want to deep dive too much with clients that are not wanting to essentially, and maybe we do that over time. But when you talk about the inner child and what that then, and we've touched on this in the episode, what that then brings into your adulthood, and sometimes, and there's very powerful therapy where you essentially go back to caring for the inner child, the inner Sarah, the inner Gabrielle. Like, how does that inner child feel? Is it nourished or is it alone, scared? All of the things that we've spoken about there, and what you trying to do there. And again, this all comes down to self-awareness. I've been in tribes before, and I thought when you come out of it, you think, fucking hell, that was toxic. Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
But at the
Yep.
time, you're like, these are my people. They're my ride or
Yeah.
dies. But let me tell you, they wouldn't do anything to help you unless it was money orientated or what have you, respecting the industry. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a bitter pill to swallow, but I always say I'd rather be on my own now. And then, part of these toxic environments. I also did have a question, and it sort of feeds into this from Romana, who she's one of my co-hosts. Now, she's a heavily muscled female in the bodybuilding space. She's actually an Olympian as well, which is very, very cool. And I said to her, I'm doing this episode with you because we talk a lot about the male female. So the gender side of, how this could cause bias. It made me think of that because the tribes, again, it could be all females that become quite, could be all males, could be a mix. But generally speaking, you start to see this formulation across gender as well. And she actually said, could I ask you about when people do tend to hurl abuse, put abuse online about heavily muscled females and that it's not appropriate, they shouldn't have that amount of muscle. Why are you taking all these steroids? Why are you doing XYZ? She gets, she's had abuse in the street as well. She's had people shouting across the street, in the supermarket, and it baffles me, as you can imagine. But she said a bit about like what makes the inner voice turn into an outer voice, or is there not even, is it just a projection, or have you got any more sort of substance to what that could be, if you know what I mean?
Oh, I would love to know what makes the inner voice and outer voice. I would
I
love to
said that.
know what, some things are thoughts that you think to yourself in the bathroom and you don't share with anyone. So,
I have lots of them.
but there, yeah, yeah. And I'm just like, I wish that I knew more about why people say things like that. I think that in large part it is because of the way that they speak to themselves. They were obviously modeled a way of behaving that decenters authenticity and individuality and centers conformity. And they probably were not supported in being their authentic selves. They probably received criticism from family members and or friends. And the way that they speak to themselves is similarly critical. And so in sharing those thoughts, they are, contributing to a normalization of society. Like they want to tell this person that what they're doing is wrong because they want to preserve their own ideas about and support their own ideas about how people should look and behave, because that's what makes them feel safe and like society makes sense. Like people want to feel safe. They want things to be familiar and predictable, and they need things to have an understandable meaning. I mean, like we search for meaning in all sorts of things. It could be like a religious thing, or it could be like something terrible happened to us, and we wanted to have purpose and meaning. And so when we see someone who does not fit, appearance standards according to our expectations, then we have negative thoughts about that person. And then, some people will say those things out loud. And there are definitely, specific, like there are specific beauty standards for women in the fitness industry and in various other industries. But, women are supposed to be like not too muscular, air quotes, and, have not too much body fat, but a little bit body fat, like enough, air quotes. And yeah, and it's the same thing with men. Like men are supposed to have, a specific higher level of muscularity compared to women. And the stereotypes are just toxic and harmful for everyone, because with those appearance stereotypes also come behavior stereotypes and beliefs. And so you end up with a strict set of rules about, how you're supposed to look and behave. And then people think it's the same people that are fearful of kindness and self-compassion. From my experience, those are the same people that are going to say just rude, nasty shit from the comfort of their sofa, with the anonymity of their cell phone or screen. And they just can't sit with the discomfort of someone existing in a different way. They can't just sit quietly with that and deal with it. And, ironically, they're also usually the people that are like saying, oh, these people are, they get their feelings hurt too easily. I mean, well, it seems that you're a little bit upset about this person simply existing. So perhaps you're feeling a little bit self-conscious about your emotionality and your projecting.
For sure. I really like how that's tied into us talking about authenticity. Why would you be, cautious to be authentic? Because again, for Romana, I mean, she's phenomenal and an incredible human. And I'm not being
Yeah.
biased, she actually is on the topic. But,
Mhm.
but it's like, you know, she's so authentic to herself. When you meet people in life and you're like, you're so authentic to yourself, it's mesmerizing. It's like she just says it how it is. She lives how she wants to live. Then she gets these comments, and I think actually tying that into, and when I play this back to her, she'll be like, I feel like we're on something there, because it is. Why would you be scared to be authentic? Potentially because you don't want to be judged. You know, maybe you want to be a bit weird and wonderful. That's my saying. I'm like, be as weird and wonderful as humanly possible, because it feels good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. People tend to also project this when it comes to people in larger bodies too. I mean, that's part of what people have an issue with, like how could someone in a large body like actually be happy? Because I wouldn't be happy in a large body. Like they are offended, they're upset by a person choosing to exist however the heck they want to exist. And, I do believe that a lot of that comes back to a sense of resentment, which is related to jealousy, envy. It is a sense of like, why is that person happily existing? I don't believe it. And like, how dare they? And I'm putting in all this work to fit society standards, and they think that they can just get away with behaving however they want. People are gonna judge that. I mean, people who are, not fitting within like the specific rules, they are going to be ridiculed by the people who are afraid to break any rules.
For sure. That definitely is a narrative that goes around the fitness space for sure. And it's almost that entitlement as well, isn't it? It's like you say, I'm working really hard. Well, surely that person can't be happy. And I often, in previous, not so much now because I have my own circle and the people that, we bring each other up together, etc. But when I've previously been around maybe family members or whatever, and they critique the bodybuilding, it's like almost the opposite, isn't it? It's like, well, why are you working towards this physique goal? I don't understand it. And the opposite of, well, you're in a bigger body. I don't understand it. And I just resounded to, like, I'm just like, if you're happy, I'm happy. Let's do our own thing. Like it doesn't matter what size you are. And that's, I think, that maybe takes a while to get to that point, particularly as a bodybuilder, if you feel attacked by other people and, people getting on at you and et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to, I'm so glad you said it, because that's what I wanted to almost finish the episode with. When people as bodybuilders are feeling under the threat or under the pressure of people around them that don't get the bodybuilding, particularly maybe we could talk about family members or people that are incredibly close.
For
And
sure.
I often try and talk to people about this as a what's your family like, or how can I help as you and as an individual? 'Cause it's quite hard to blanket term. I of course understand that, but maybe some thought processes to people that are struggling with maybe the pressure there of being a bodybuilder and people not understanding it.
Oh, for sure. I think that it is so important and so helpful to help clients, like in from whatever context, to build boundaries and to develop communication skills that help them to more comfortably live in an authentic way, that help them to continue to live authentically. And while I want to say, cultivating an external environment that further supports that. And part of the way that we can do that is effectively communicating with the people that are saying things to us that are not acceptable. Now, some people, of course, are going to be like, oh, I don't understand bodybuilding from like a sincere point, like I really don't understand. And if we say like, oh, are you asking this from like you really want to understand? Then yeah, I can explain to you, like, this is kind of it's a hobby for me that I find X, Y, and Z. And, it's just like people do sculptures or something, to me, it's a form of self-expression. And that's it. Now, we don't owe justifications to anybody about what we're doing with our bodies, whether we want to lose weight or not. Like, No one else is living in your body, and no one else is going to be with you from the day that you're born until the day that you die. So, what you want to do with your body, like that's it. Just say, you can be like, oh, I just like bodybuilding. That's it. End of discussion. And then, if people are saying things that are rude or inappropriate or, really like obviously not in good faith, developing the skills of being able to end that conversation without escalating it and exiting the situation if possible
Yeah.
is like, I've worked with clients who, deal with like parents with, or like mothers that have been entrenched in diet culture, people commenting on their food, and body size and whatnot. And so I think, practicing that assertive response to say, I'm not going to answer that question, or that's an odd question to ask. Oh, that's a strange thing to say out loud. Like to point out like how I really feel about that question. I don't feel comfortable answering that. Or I actually don't need to explain myself. Like that's it. That is an answer. No is a whole sentence.
Mm.
So, that would be my advice, is to build the skills. And there's also an aspect of self-regulation to that, because it can be unnerving. It can be very like anxiety inducing to set those boundaries, especially when people are not accustomed to you speaking up about things. And, to, as best as you can, try not to escalate the situation, because it's not going to be good for either one of you. If it becomes a conflict, it's just as unpleasant for you. But yeah, to be able to just set those boundaries, or, comments about body, about appearance, sometimes people are okay with those, and that's fine. As a general rule, I don't say things about people's bodies. Like it doesn't matter, if I think like, wow, that person looks really fantastic. I might say like, oh, you look super happy today, something like that. But I avoid saying things about a person's physique, because I don't want to perpetuate that preoccupation with, how this person looks. I don't want to connect their personality traits or their character with how they look. Oh wow, I see you lost weight, you're so dedicated, like I can tell you're such a hard worker. That person could be a dedicated hard worker in many other areas of life without changing their physique. So even responses, to physique comments, like, oh, I really appreciate the comment. I actually prefer that people don't make comments about my body. I know that you're coming from a good place. And also, I prefer not to discuss that.
Mm.
Like, they're, just to say, and most of the time also boundaries have to have some level of consequence. So you can't just keep asking like, hey, I really don't prefer to have conversations about bodies, or, I'm not going to have conversations, I'm not going to ask questions that are not in good faith. If you keep asking me questions like that, I'm going to have to stop communicating with you. Because there are people that you can tell them your boundaries and they will just keep running over them. So, that part can really be tough. But yeah, it's like you are advocating for yourself. You are asserting your innate right to be able to exist in your body and to treat your body in a way that you choose. You're not harming anyone else, and so people can mind their business.
Yeah. Again, it's empowering. Like we talked about the freedom of when you start to deal with your own, neuroticism, and however you want to frame that. Essentially, it is neuroticism when we go down these rabbit holes as bodybuilders or fitness enthusiasts. Again, when you assert boundaries, the first time you do it, like you said, you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna say no. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna say, can you not say that again? You say it, and you're like,
Yes.
I did it. And I
Mm-hmm.
often reference this on the pod. It's so easy now. Like if someone was to comment on my food,
Yep.
say, "Can I just eat my meal?" That's it.
Yeah.
There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing else to it. But in the early days, I'd be like, "Oh my God, I can't say anything."
Yeah, for sure. There's like this threat, this like unnamed threat of like something bad is going to happen if I speak up to this person, or I'm not allowed to walk away. I'm not allowed to end this conversation. I owe them an explanation or else. No.
And
No, you
even
don't.
family, it's, family
Mhm.
doesn't, if someone is, being impactful negatively on your mental health, potentially then a knock onto your also physical health, at some point there needs to be an element of almost sticking up for yourself. And I know it sounds a little bit, but it is, isn't it? Because it's detrimental to your whole being. These types of comments and thought processes, you can be scared to go home, you could be scared to eat your food, and you're living on edge because you want to pursue something like bodybuilding. It's really not right. But again, if people hear this conversation, they might actually go, wait, this is happening to me, and I didn't really give it the weight that maybe I could to actually pursue this with more of a positive outcome for my mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a skill that you can use in any situation where someone is behaving in a way that is not supportive of your well-being. Like that's a super helpful skill. And then you can also have better relationships with people because they understand like your road signs, they understand how to navigate a dynamic with you. So in many cases, it's actually for the betterment, of the relationship because you don't have one person that's like quietly being trodden on and the other one is just like maybe totally ignorant and unaware that what they're saying is problematic. And so when you open up that door for conversation, then you can come to an understanding. And if the person really does have good intentions and, they say, well, I'm just concerned because you look really lean and I don't know what effect it's happening on your health, then you can say, oh, okay, I understand, like you are legitimately concerned and you're open to understanding and we can talk about like the risks that I'm aware of and that I have taken on. And
Mm,
if the person doesn't really is not coming from a place of good faith and their questions or comments are thinly veiled insults, then you know that person, you limit their access to you because that is not a person who has your best interests at heart. It's not always easy to see the difference between the two, but that's why it's so important to be able to at least navigate that conversation and say something to start off with rather than being quiet or having a conflict, but just to open up the conversation and figure out what this person's intentions are and then go from there.
Just actually sprung to mind that the threat as well, which you've mentioned a couple of times today, of if you do get really lean and your partner starts to think, hold on a minute, this person I was with and we weren't bodybuilders before, and now she or he is a bodybuilder, and wait, is that a threat that maybe they're going to meet someone else or they're going to, attract more people, etc. Again, that could be a threat from, your partner. And sometimes it's a case of having a conversation and reassuring them that actually, I'm doing this for me, and that's
Yeah.
not the outcome. Because I feel like you can easily forget. People don't. You're a bodybuilder. You get it. You're doing it for the sport. You're doing it for the sport. The people around you didn't ask you to do it, and they're
Mm-hmm.
having to suddenly fit this new narrative of, oh, well, Sarah's getting lean now. Oh, okay, no meals out, no nothing. She's doing this thing. Oh, okay, right. So where do I fit in Sarah's life? Because she's doing all these things, and I've definitely had this with
Yeah.
multiple relationships, and that's why I can talk about it so easily. And sometimes you've got to go, maybe my mum is concerned about me being really lean, because my mum was the first few times she thought I had, anorexia. She really, really did.
Yeah.
She was really worried.
Yep. Yeah.
Then I was like, does it draw, problems between me and my ex-partner? Like maybe there was an undercurrent there. You start to look back, don't you? You think actually in their head, there is worries, there is fear for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because they have a specific set of expectations about you and they feel safe with that version of you. And then things change and they have to adapt to this new version. And yeah, I mean, they might have, a history that influences the way that they are interpreting these changes. And, they have insecurities. And while other people's feelings aren't our responsibility, if we're in a relationship and we can see, that our partner is struggling, there is a shared responsibility to support each other and to help each other feel safe and secure, and like some of that is going to come from like, hey, I can assure you, like, I'm doing this for my own reasons. And the other side comes from that partner identifying, hey, I've got some body image issues that I haven't worked through and I need to do that. Like, I can't tell my partner, you have to maintain your body in a certain way so that I don't get triggered,
Yeah.
So yeah, and the same thing with family members. I mean, I think it can be easy when we're feeling like the odd person out to think that like we are being criticized or victimized in a way, like when someone is coming to us with a sincere misunderstanding or a sincere concern. And I think it's important to be aware of that as well, to say, I really need to check in on this person's intentions before I decide how they're coming at me. Like my feelings are still valid. Like I can still feel annoyed, like, gosh, I just want to exist and live my life. Of course you do. And also there's room for that to be true, and for it to be true that your mom really has never seen this before and really doesn't understand and is worried, and that's why she's questioning. And maybe she's not questioning or making comments in a great way, and you can have a conversation about how to ask questions and in a way that helps to build the relationship. And the same thing with partners. Like, I've done one competition and that was enough. But even when I did powerlifting, like there were times, leading up to my competitions where, yeah, I wasn't going out to eat, I was having long training sessions. I needed to get to bed at a specific time. Like my life became much more structured.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is going to affect a relationship. So it's like at the very least, say like, hey, I want to do a show. Here's the things that can potentially change. And it's no different from if there's like a job change or, a kid on the way. Like these are all things that, well, kid on the way is maybe both people a little bit more, but like a job change, something like that, so that you can say, hey, I want to help us prepare for the time ahead because I know things have been this way for a long time. And for a while, they're going to be that way. And that way, we can prepare as best as possible and keep the lines of communication open and try not to make assumptions about what's going on for the other person. Even with all of our past experience, we don't know this person 100%. Like we still have to be open, for those conversations.
Yeah, you never, even if you know someone incredibly well and you've dedicated your life to them, you never truly know what anyone else is thinking unless you're a superhero. And I doubt there's any superheroes listening, is it's like yeah, that in itself is a level of acceptance of the human brain, of course. Now, I would also like to credit you for what you've done with, changing your business model, your social media, and actually being more authentic to yourself. Over the episode, the listeners would have understood parts of how you've, like you say, come away from certain communities, etc. And that in itself, it's showing your authenticity and what a person to speak to on an episode like this to actually bring value to the listeners. And it's incredible what you've done and what you're trying to do with your social media and the path you're heading, hence why you're on the podcast. So yeah, just an acknowledgement there. I know, of course we do our own thing, etc., but it's important because you're being authentic to you and it's good to see.
I really appreciate that. And the feeling is mutual. I mean, we even have different groups of clients and whatnot, but like you can see that we have the same value system and the same mission. And so it's always so refreshing to speak with other people who are on that wavelength. And I can see your authenticity too. So I'm sure that's why we click so easily.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'm sure we would maybe do another episode in the future if you'd want to come back on.
Of course, I would love it. I'm always up. I'm always up for a podcast with you. Absolutely.
Thank you. I will put your Instagram in the description, of course, so people give Gabrielle a follow or maybe have a look at the content I'm talking about, and then you'll get a gist of, what I mentioned there. But thank you again, and we will speak real soon.
Thank you.
Bye.